The late afternoon sun cast long golden shadows across Broadway in downtown Nashville as David Morrison pulled his Tesla into the parking garage beneath the historic Mercantile building. The structure was a beautifully restored six-story brick edifice from 1924, its facade a testament to old Nashville elegance mixed with modern Music City energy. David had purchased the building 3 months ago for $8.2 million, adding it to his growing portfolio of commercial properties across the Southeast. He stepped out of the car, adjusting his navy blazer, and walked around to open the door for his wife, Angela. She emerged gracefully, smoothing down her burgundy dress, the same color she'd worn to their wedding 22 years ago. In the back seat, their daughter Maya sat proudly in her cap and gown, clutching her high school diploma like a trophy. Today was Maya's day. She had graduated summa cum laude from Nashville Academy, earned a full scholarship to Vanderbilt, and delivered a valedictorian speech that had brought tears to David's eyes. The celebration dinner had been planned for weeks, and David had chosen Romano's Italian restaurant specifically because it occupied the ground floor of his newly acquired building. He hadn't told Vincent Romano, the restaurant owner, about the purchase yet. The previous landlord had managed the tenant relationships, and David's company, Morrison Properties LLC, handled everything through attorneys and property managers. As far as Vincent knew, nothing had changed. His lease was secure, his rent was reasonable, and he'd been operating in the same location for 30 years without issue. David had done his research on Romano's. The restaurant had a solid reputation, decent reviews, and a loyal customer base. But he'd also noticed something troubling in recent online feedback. Several reviewers, all Black or Latino, mentioned feeling unwelcome. They described cold service, suspicious looks, and in one case, being told there were no available tables despite visible empty seats. David had filed those observations away, planning to address them diplomatically once he officially introduced himself as the new landlord. But tonight wasn't about business. Tonight was about family, celebration, and giving Maya a memory she'd treasure. The three of them walked hand in hand through the building's elegant lobby, past the restored original elevator with its brass accordion gate, and toward the restaurant entrance. Through the frosted glass doors, David could see the warm glow of candlelit tables and hear the gentle murmur of conversation mixed with soft Italian music. Angela squeezed his hand. "This is perfect, baby. Maya's going to love it." Maya beamed, her graduation cap tilted slightly to one side. "I can't believe we're eating at Romano's. Jessica said their tiramisu is legendary." David smiled, reaching for the door handle. "Only the best for my brilliant daughter." But the moment they stepped inside, David felt the atmosphere shift. The hostess, a young blonde woman in a crisp white shirt and black slacks, looked up from her podium. Her smile faltered. Her eyes moved from David to Angela to Maya, lingering on Maya's cap and gown with an expression that wasn't quite welcoming. "Good evening," David said warmly. "Reservation for Morrison, party of 3, 6:30. The hostess glanced down at her reservation book, her finger trailing down the page. "Morrison," she repeated slowly. She looked up, her professional mask slipping slightly. "And you made this reservation when?" 2 weeks ago, David replied, his tone still pleasant. "Confirmed it yesterday by phone." The hostess bit her lip, glancing toward the back of the restaurant. "One moment, please." She disappeared through a doorway marked private, leaving the Morrisons standing in the small waiting area. David could feel the eyes of nearby diners on them. A middle-aged white couple at a corner table whispered to each other. A businessman dining alone looked up from his wine, his gaze lingering a moment too long. Angela leaned close to David. "Everything okay?" "I'm sure it's fine," David said, though a knot was forming in his stomach. "Probably just checking on the table." But it wasn't fine. The hostess returned, and behind her was Vincent Romano himself. David recognized him from the lease documents, his photograph attached to the original business registration. Vincent was in his early 50s, impeccably dressed in a tailored black suit with an Italian flag pin on his lapel. His salt and pepper hair was slicked back with precision, and his expression carried the kind of confidence that came from 3 decades of running a successful establishment. But there was something else in his eyes as he looked at the Morrisons, something cold, something dismissive. "Good evening," Vincent said, his accent carrying a faint trace of Italian inflection. "I understand there's some confusion about a reservation." David extended his hand. "David Morrison. We have a 6:30 reservation for 3. Vincent didn't take his hand. Instead, he glanced at the hostess, who handed him the reservation book. He studied it for a moment, then looked back at David. "I see the name here," Vincent said slowly, "but I'm afraid there's been a mistake. We have a dress code policy at Romano's, business formal, jacket and tie for gentlemen, evening wear for ladies." David glanced down at his blazer and dress shirt. "I'm wearing a jacket." Vincent's eyes moved to Maya, still in her cap and gown. "Graduation attire is not appropriate for our dining room. We maintain a certain atmosphere here. I'm sure you understand." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Angela's grip on David's hand tightened. Maya's smile had vanished, replaced by a look of confusion and hurt. David kept his voice level. "My daughter just graduated with honors. We're here to celebrate. Surely you can make an exception for a special occasion." Vincent's expression didn't change. "I'm afraid not. Our policies apply to everyone. There are plenty of other restaurants in Nashville that might be more suitable for your family." The emphasis on "your family" was subtle but unmistakable. David felt heat rising in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. "We have a confirmed reservation. We were appropriately dressed. There's no reason we shouldn't be seated." Vincent's jaw tightened. "Sir, I am the owner of this establishment, and I have the right to refuse service to anyone who doesn't meet our standards. Now, I'm going to have to ask you to leave before this becomes uncomfortable for everyone." Before David could respond, Vincent gestured to a large man standing near the bar. The man, clearly security, began walking toward them. Angela's voice was quiet but firm. "David, let's just go." But David wasn't ready to go. Not yet. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. With a few quick taps, he opened an email from his property attorney, the one confirming the purchase of the Mercantile building and listing all current tenants, including Romano's Italian restaurant. He turned the screen toward Vincent. "Before you have us removed, Mr. Romano, I think you should know something. I own this building. As of 3 months ago, I am your landlord." The color drained from Vincent's face. His eyes moved from the phone screen to David's face, searching for some sign that this was a joke. The security guard stopped mid-step, looking confused. Vincent's mouth opened, but no words came out. David's voice was steady, controlled. "Your lease is up for renewal in 4 months. And based on what I've just experienced, along with the pattern of complaints I've been reviewing, I don't think that renewal is going to happen." Vincent found his voice, though it came out strangled. You can't do that. I have rights. I've been here for 30 years. "And you just exercised your right to refuse service to your landlord and his family," David replied, "based on fabricated dress code violations in front of witnesses." The restaurant had gone completely silent. Every diner was watching now. Some looked shocked, others looked uncomfortable. A few pulled out their phones, undoubtedly recording. Vincent's face had gone from pale to red. "This is a misunderstanding. I didn't know." "You didn't need to know who I was," David interrupted. "You needed to treat us with the same respect you'd show any customer. You failed to do that. And this isn't the first time, is it?" Vincent's eyes darted around the room, looking for support but finding none. David continued, his voice carrying across the now silent dining room. "I've read the reviews, Mr. Romano. I've seen the complaints. Black families made to wait while white families with later reservations get seated immediately. Servers who are cold and dismissive to customers of color. A pattern of behavior that makes people feel unwelcome in a restaurant that sits on property I own. Vincent's hands were shaking now. "Sir, please, I can explain." "There's nothing to explain," David said. He looked at Angela and Maya. "Let's go. We'll celebrate somewhere that actually wants our business." As the Morrisons turned to leave, a voice called out from across the restaurant. "Wait!" David turned. An older white couple was standing up from their table, the same couple who had been whispering earlier. The man stepped forward, his face serious. "I'm Robert Fletcher," he said. "I've been coming to this restaurant for 15 years, and I've seen what you're talking about. I've watched Mr. Romano treat people differently based on how they look. I've never said anything because, well, it wasn't my problem. But I was wrong. It is my problem. And I want you to know that what just happened here was disgraceful." His wife nodded, her eyes glistening. "We won't be coming back." They gathered their belongings and walked out, pausing to shake David's hand on their way past. Then another couple stood. Then a family of 4. Then a group of business associates. One by one, nearly half the dining room emptied, customers leaving their meals half-eaten, their bills unpaid, their disgust with Vincent Romano clear. Vincent stood frozen, watching his restaurant empty in real time, the consequences of his actions unfolding before his eyes. David looked at him one last time. "You'll be hearing from my attorneys about your lease. Enjoy your evening, Mr. Romano." And with that, the Morrison family walked out into the Nashville night, leaving Vincent Romano to face the ruins of his 30-year legacy. The next morning, David sat in his office on the top floor of another property he owned in the Gulch neighborhood. His attorney, Sharon Mendez, sat across from him, a thick folder open on the desk between them. "Romano's lease has a standard non-discrimination clause," Sharon said, pointing to a highlighted section. "By refusing service based on race, he violated the terms. We have grounds for immediate termination." David nodded, but his expression was thoughtful. "What about the other tenants in the building?" "I don't want this to affect them." "It won't," Sharon assured him. "This is specific to Romano's. The other businesses, the law firm on 3, the design agency on 4, the co-working space on 5. They're all in good standing." David leaned back in his chair. "How long has Romano been getting away with this?" Sharon flipped through the folder. "Based on the complaints I've gathered, at least 5 years. Maybe longer. The previous landlord either didn't know or didn't care. Most of the complaints were filed with online review sites, not with the property management." "But people knew," David said quietly. "The staff knew. The regulars knew. And they all just let it happen." Sharon's expression was sympathetic. "Unfortunately, that's often how it works. People don't want to cause trouble. They don't want to believe someone they know could be discriminatory. So they look the other way." David was quiet for a moment, thinking about Maya's face last night, the hurt and confusion in her eyes. Thinking about Angela's quiet dignity as they walked out. Thinking about his own father, who had faced similar humiliations throughout his life and never had the power to fight back. "I want Romano out," David said firmly, "but I want it done right, legal, airtight. I don't want him to have any basis to claim he was unfairly targeted." Sharon made a note. "I'll draft the termination notice today. Given the lease violation, he'll have 30 days to vacate." "What about his employees?" David asked. "The servers, the kitchen staff, they're going to lose their jobs." Sharon considered this. "You could offer them positions with whatever restaurant takes over the space, or provide severance assistance, but that's not your legal obligation." "Maybe not legally," David said, "but it's the right thing to do. Those employees didn't create this culture. Romano did. They shouldn't suffer for his mistakes." Sharon smiled. "You're a better person than most landlords I work with." David shook his head. "I'm just trying to build something better than what I inherited." The news spread quickly. By noon, the story was all over Nashville media. Local restaurant owner ousted after discriminating against building owner's family. The video recorded by diners had gone viral, showing Vincent Romano's confrontation with the Morrisons and the subsequent walkout of customers. The reaction was swift and brutal. Romano's phone rang constantly with reservation cancellations. His Yelp page was flooded with one-star reviews. Food critics who had once praised his osso buco and handmade pasta were now writing scathing articles about the toxic culture they claimed to have always suspected. Vincent hired a PR firm to manage the crisis. They crafted a statement claiming the incident was a misunderstanding, that Vincent had been having a bad day, that he deeply regretted his actions and was committed to doing better. But the damage was done. Even if David hadn't owned the building, Romano's reputation was destroyed. The restaurant that had once been a Nashville staple was now a symbol of everything wrong with subtle, insidious racism in the hospitality industry. 3 days after the incident, Vincent requested a meeting with David. Sharon advised against it, but David agreed, curious to hear what Vincent had to say. They met at a neutral location, a coffee shop in East Nashville. Vincent arrived looking haggard, his usual polished appearance replaced by disheveled hair and wrinkled clothes. His eyes were red-rimmed, his hands trembling slightly as he stirred sugar into his espresso. "Thank you for meeting with me," Vincent said, his voice hoarse. David nodded but said nothing. Vincent continued, struggling to find words. "I want you to know that I'm not. I didn't think I was..." He stopped, frustrated with himself. "I've been in this business for 30 years. I've served thousands of people. I never thought of myself as prejudiced." David's expression was neutral. "But you are." Vincent flinched as if struck. "I made a mistake. I let my assumptions cloud my judgment. I looked at you and your family and made decisions based on things that shouldn't have mattered. Based on the color of our skin," David said quietly. Vincent's silence was confirmation enough. David leaned forward. "Mr. Romano, do you know what the worst part of last night was? It wasn't the refusal of service. It wasn't the fake dress code. It was watching my daughter's face as she realized that on one of the most important days of her life, someone looked at her and decided she wasn't good enough, that she didn't belong." Vincent's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry. I truly am." "Are you sorry for what you did, or sorry that you got caught?" David asked. "Because the reviews suggest this wasn't the first time. The difference is, this time you discriminated against someone who had the power to hold you accountable." Vincent looked down at his untouched espresso. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to understand," David said. "I want you to look at what you've built over 30 years and see how easily it crumbled, because you couldn't see past your own prejudice. I want you to think about every person of color who walked into your restaurant and felt unwelcome, who left feeling small, who never came back." Vincent was crying now, tears rolling down his weathered cheeks. "I've lost everything." "You lost what you built on a broken foundation," David replied. "And maybe that's an opportunity. To learn, to grow, to become someone better than who you were." Vincent looked up, desperate. "Is there any way, any possibility that you might reconsider the lease termination?" David shook his head. "No. You violated the terms and you violated the trust. Romano's is finished." Vincent's face crumpled. David stood, preparing to leave, but paused. "For what it's worth," David said, "I hope you use this experience to change. Not just your behavior, but your heart. Because the next time you look at someone who doesn't look like you, I hope you see a person. Not a threat, not an outsider, but a person worthy of the same dignity you'd want for yourself." David walked out, leaving Vincent alone with his regrets. 6 weeks later, the Romano's signage came down. The space underwent a complete renovation, and David partnered with a local restaurant group to bring in a new concept, Harmony Kitchen, an upscale soul food restaurant owned by chef Tasha Williams, a James Beard-nominated black chef who had been struggling to find investors for her vision. The opening night was packed. Local celebrities, food critics, and community leaders filled the dining room. David sat at a corner table with Angela and Maya, watching as Chef Tasha welcomed guests with genuine warmth and joy. Maya, now preparing for her first semester at Vanderbilt, looked around the transformed space. "Dad, this is amazing. You turned something ugly into something beautiful." David smiled. "I didn't do it alone. Chef Tasha had the vision. I just provided the opportunity." Angela squeezed his hand. "You did more than that. You made a statement. You showed that discrimination has consequences." As the evening progressed, Robert Fletcher, the customer who had first stood up in Romano's that night, approached their table. "Mr. Morrison," Robert said, extending his hand, "I wanted to thank you. What you did, standing up like that, it made me realize I'd been complicit for too long. I've started speaking up now, calling out bias when I see it. You inspired that." David shook his hand. "That means more than you know." After Robert left, David sat back and watched the restaurant buzz with life. The space that had once excluded people now celebrated them. The building he owned was no longer just an investment. It was a symbol of the kind of community he wanted to help build. 5 years later, David Morrison's portfolio had expanded to include properties across Tennessee, Georgia, and the Carolinas. He'd become known not just as a savvy investor, but as someone who used his position to promote equity and inclusion in commercial real estate. Harmony Kitchen had become one of Nashville's most celebrated restaurants, with Chef Tasha opening 2 more locations and landing her own cooking show. Vincent Romano had disappeared from Nashville's restaurant scene. Some said he'd moved to Florida. Others heard he was working as a line cook in a small town somewhere, humbled and broken. David didn't keep tabs on him. He'd said what needed to be said, and Vincent's journey was his own. Maya graduated from Vanderbilt with honors and was accepted to Harvard Law School. At her graduation party, held at Harmony Kitchen, she stood to give a toast. "I want to thank my parents," she said, her voice strong and clear. "Especially my dad, who taught me that dignity isn't something you ask for. It's something you claim. And when someone tries to take it from you, you don't just fight for yourself. You fight to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else." The room erupted in applause. David felt tears prick his eyes, the same tears he'd felt 5 years ago when his daughter had been humiliated for no reason other than the color of her skin. But those tears meant something different now. They weren't tears of pain or anger. They were tears of pride, of hope, of knowing that the next generation would inherit a world slightly better than the one before. Because that's what this had always been about, not revenge, not even justice really. It was about creating space for people to exist without fear, without judgment, without having to prove their worth to someone who had already decided they didn't belong. David stood on the balcony of the Mercantile building, looking out at the Nashville skyline. The city had changed so much since he'd first moved here 25 years ago, a young man with big dreams and very little capital. He'd faced countless doors slammed in his face, countless people who underestimated him, countless moments when he wanted to give up. But he hadn't. And now he owned 6 buildings in this city, employed hundreds of people, provided opportunities for businesses owned by women and minorities who couldn't get funding elsewhere. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Angela. "Dinner's ready. Your favorite. Get home before it gets cold." David smiled, pocketing his phone. He took one last look at the city, at the building that had started this journey, at the restaurant below where Harmony Kitchen's lights glowed warm and welcoming. He thought about Vincent Romano one last time. He hoped the man had found peace, had learned from his mistakes, had become someone better. But whether he had or hadn't, that wasn't David's burden to carry. What mattered was this. When faced with injustice, David had not stayed silent. He had not accepted it. He had used his power not for revenge, but for change. And in doing so, he'd shown his daughter and countless others watching that prejudice always has a price. Sometimes that price is everything. Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.